The breaking point. The massive trade station Omega-7 hung in space like a metallic flower, its docking arms reaching out to embrace ships from across the galaxy. Captain Sarah Chen guided her cargo vessel, the Stellar Hope, through the designated approach vector, her experienced hands steady on the controls despite the knot of anxiety in her stomach. Behind her, 3 more human freighters followed in formation, their holds packed with desperately needed medical supplies. "Captain, we're receiving docking clearance from Station Control," reported her communications officer, Lieutenant James Park. His young face showed the same tension that had gripped the entire crew since they'd left Earth's orbital stations 2 weeks ago. Sarah nodded, watching the massive station grow larger on their view screen. Omega-7 was supposed to be neutral territory, governed by the Galactic Trade Council and protected by international law. But lately, those laws seem to apply differently depending on which species you belong to. "Take us in slow and steady, James, and keep our diplomatic transponder active. I want everyone to know we're here on a mercy mission." The Stellar Hope and her escort ships carried enough medical supplies to save the human colony on Kepler 442 bits, where a plague had already claimed thousands of lives. The medicines in their cargo holds represented months of work by Earth's finest scientists and doctors. More importantly, they represented hope for nearly 250,000 colonists who had been abandoned by the galaxy's major powers. As they approached their assigned berth, Sarah noticed the other ships already docked at the station. Sleek Plutonian trade vessels with their crystalline hulls, massive Centaurian bulk haulers that dwarfed even the largest human ships, and scattered throughout the docking arms, the angular black warships of the Vorthak Empire. Sarah's jaw tightened at the sight of those predatory vessels. The Vorthak had been expanding their territory aggressively, claiming system after system, while the Galactic Council did nothing but file diplomatic protests. Dr. Marcus Rivera joined Sarah on the bridge, his diplomatic credentials gleaming on his formal uniform. As humanity's chief xenobiologist and one of their most experienced negotiators, Marcus had volunteered to accompany this mission despite the obvious dangers. "The station commander has agreed to meet with us in 1 hour," he reported. "I'm hoping we can get clearance to proceed directly to Kepler 442 bits without any delays." Sarah appreciated Marcus's optimism, but 3 decades of space trading had taught her to expect the worst when dealing with galactic politics. "What about the Vorthak presence? Those aren't merchant ships docked here." Marcus's expression darkened slightly. "Intelligence reports suggest they're conducting what they call security inspections of vessels passing through this sector. Officially, they're looking for smuggled weapons and illegal technologies. And unofficially, they're flexing their muscles, showing the galaxy that they can stop anyone, anywhere, anytime they want." The docking procedure went smoothly, and within an hour, Sarah and Marcus were walking through the station's main corridor toward the administrative section. Omega-7 bustled with activity as traders from dozens of species conducted business, but Sarah noticed how conversations stopped when humans passed by. Some aliens stared with curious indifference, others with barely concealed contempt. They were halfway to their appointment when the lights flickered and an announcement echoed through the station's communication system. The voice belonged to Commander Zektar of the Vorthak Empire, his harsh chittering translated into standard galactic by the station's computers. "Attention all vessels. The Vorthak Imperial Navy is conducting mandatory security inspections of all cargo ships currently docked at this station. Compliance is required under Galactic Security Resolution 2387A. Any resistance will be considered an act of aggression against the Empire." Sarah and Marcus exchanged glances. There was no such resolution, and everyone knew it. But the Vorthak had 12 heavily armed warships in the area, while the station's security force consisted of 6 patrol boats that wouldn't last 10 minutes in a real fight. "We need to get back to our ships," Sarah said, already turning around. They ran through the corridors, pushing past slower-moving aliens who seemed unconcerned by the announcement. By the time they reached the docking arm, where the human ships were berthed, squads of Vorthak soldiers were already boarding the Stellar Hope and her escorts. The Vorthak were an insectoid species, standing nearly 8 feet tall with chitinous armor that served as both skin and natural protection. Their mandibles clicked constantly as they communicated in their native language, and their compound eyes missed nothing. Sarah had dealt with them before in various trade negotiations, and she knew they viewed most other species as inferior life forms barely worthy of acknowledgement. Commander Zektar stood at the entrance to the Stellar Hope, his black carapace decorated with the silver insignia of his rank. When he saw Sarah and Marcus approaching, his mandibles spread in what might have been amusement. "Captain Chin," he said, his voice carrying the mechanical undertone of a universal translator. "How convenient. I was hoping to speak with you about your cargo." "Commander Zektar," Sarah replied, keeping her voice level despite the anger building inside her. "My ships are carrying medical supplies to a human colony suffering from a plague outbreak. We have all the proper documentation and clearances." "Yes, medical supplies." Zektar's compound eyes glittered. "Very valuable medical supplies. It would be unfortunate if such important cargo fell into the wrong hands." Dr. Rivera stepped forward, his diplomatic credentials visible on his uniform. "Commander, I am Dr. Marcus Rivera, representing the Earth Diplomatic Corps. These supplies are protected under the Galactic Medical Relief Act. Any interference with their delivery would constitute a violation of interstellar law." The Vorthak commander's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sound Sarah had learned to recognize as laughter. "Interstellar law. Doctor, surely you understand that laws are only as strong as those who enforce them. And I see no enforcers here except my soldiers." Around them, other aliens went about their business, as if nothing unusual was happening. A group of Plutonian merchants walked past without even glancing at the confrontation. Several Centaurian traders actually stopped to watch, apparently finding the situation entertaining. "The medicines in our holds could save thousands of lives," Marcus continued, his voice taking on a pleading tone that made Sarah's stomach turn. "Surely the Empire doesn't want the deaths of innocent colonists on their conscience." "Conscience." Zektar repeated the word as if tasting something unpleasant. "Doctor, the weak deserve their fate. If your colonists were strong enough to survive, they would not need our permission to obtain medicine. Natural selection is the greatest teacher in the galaxy." Sarah watched in horror as Vorthak soldiers began carrying sealed medical containers out of her ship's cargo hold. Each container represented weeks of research and production, irreplaceable treatments for a plague that had already killed too many people. "Stop," she said, stepping forward. "You have no right to take those supplies." Commander Zektar turned his full attention to her, his massive form looming over the human captain. "Rights. Captain, rights are earned through strength. Your species has chosen the path of weakness, begging for scraps at the table of your betters. This is simply a reminder of your place in the natural order." Dr. Rivera tried one more diplomatic approach. "Commander, if you're concerned about the cargo's contents, we can provide detailed manifests and even allow your scientists to verify everything. But please, don't condemn innocent people to death." The Vorthak commander's response chilled everyone within hearing distance. "Very well, Doctor. I will demonstrate the cost of human weakness." He barked an order in his native language, and 2 of his soldiers grabbed Lieutenant Park, who had been standing near the ship's gangway. The young officer struggled briefly before a Vorthak stunner dropped him to his knees. "No." Sarah lunged forward, but more soldiers blocked her path. Commander Zektar drew his sidearm, a weapon designed to cause maximum pain before death. "Let this serve as a lesson to all humans. When you beg, you receive nothing but contempt. When you resist, you receive death." The sound of the weapon discharge echoed through the docking bay. Lieutenant Park's body crumpled to the deck, and Sarah Chen felt something break inside her chest. Not just her heart, but something deeper. Something that had sustained her through decades of insults, condescension, and casual cruelty from species that considered themselves humanity's superiors. The alien spectators who had been watching the confrontation began to disperse, apparently satisfied that the entertainment was over. The Plutonian merchants resumed their conversation about trade routes. The Centaurian traders laughed about something unrelated. To them, the death of a human was no more significant than stepping on an insect. Dr. Rivera knelt beside Park's body, his hands shaking as he checked for any sign of life. When he looked up at Sarah, tears were streaming down his face. "He's gone." Sarah stared at Commander Zektar, memorizing every detail of his hideous face. "You murdered him." "I executed a member of an inferior species who failed to show proper respect," the Vorthak replied calmly. "Perhaps his death will teach other humans the importance of knowing their place." As the Vorthak soldiers finished loading the medical supplies onto their transport vehicles, Sarah activated her personal communicator. Her message was brief and coded, but every human ship captain in the sector would understand its meaning. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Stellar Hope. Code Black. Repeat, Code Black. All human vessels, transmit full recordings to Earth Command immediately." Commander Zektar's mandibles clicked with amusement. "Calling for help, Captain. I assure you, the Galactic Council will file your complaint with all the others. Perhaps in a few years, they will schedule a hearing to discuss your concerns." Sarah said nothing, but her communicator continued transmitting. Every word, every image, every detail of what had happened here was being recorded and sent through the quantum relay network to Earth. More importantly, it was being sent to Admiral Elena Vasquez, commander of humanity's deep space exploration fleet. Within hours, the recordings of Lieutenant Park's execution and the theft of medical supplies had reached every human world in the galaxy. The response was immediate and volcanic. Across Earth, Mars, the asteroid colonies, and dozens of frontier worlds, humans watched the footage with growing rage. But it was the response from the Galactic Council that finally pushed humanity past the point of no return. When Dr. Rivera formally presented his complaint about the incident at Omega-7, the Council's response was delivered by High Merchant Krillnox of the Plutonian Trade Consortium. "The Council has reviewed the human complaint regarding the incident at Trade Station Omega-7, Krillnox announced, his crystal-like body refracting the chamber's lights. "We find that Commander Zektar acted within his authority to maintain security in his assigned sector. The death of the human officer, while regrettable, was the result of resistance to lawful inspection procedures." The chamber filled with sounds of agreement from representatives of the major galactic powers. The Centaurian delegates hummed their approval. The Vorthak embassy chittered with satisfaction. Even species that had previously been neutral began nodding their agreement. Dr. Rivera stood alone at the speaker's podium, his voice barely containing his rage. "The Galactic Council is sanctioning murder. You're telling every species in the galaxy that human lives have no value." "Dr. Rivera," Krillnox replied, his tone condescending, "the Council makes decisions based on the greater good of galactic civilization. Humans must learn that their actions have consequences. Perhaps this incident will encourage your species to be more cooperative in future interactions." The vote was unanimous, except for humanity's single representative. The murder of Lieutenant James Park was officially classified as a justifiable response to human resistance. The theft of medical supplies was reclassified as confiscation of potentially dangerous materials. On Earth, Admiral Elena Vasquez received the Council's decision in her private office at Luna Command. She read the document twice, then activated her personal communication system and sent a message that would change the course of galactic history. Authorization Code Prometheus 7. All deep space commanders, return to designated rally points immediately. Operation Nightfall is now active. Repeat, Operation Nightfall is active. Across the galaxy, human ships that had been operating as peaceful merchants, explorers, and scientists began changing course. Hidden weapon systems came online. Concealed armor plating extended from seemingly innocent cargo holds. Ships that had appeared helpless revealed their true nature as advanced warships. The galaxy had pushed humanity too far. And now they were about to learn the cost of their arrogance. Captain Sarah Chen stood at the viewing port of her damaged ship, looking out at the stars where Lieutenant Park's body had been jettisoned into space according to Vorthak custom. She had spent 30 years trying to build bridges between humans and other species. She had endured insults, discrimination, and casual cruelty because she believed that patience and diplomacy would eventually win respect. Now she understood that some species only respected strength, and humanity was about to show them exactly how strong humans could be when their patience finally ran out. The quantum communicator on her bridge chimed with an incoming message. Admiral Vasquez's face appeared on the screen, her expression grim but determined. Captain Chen, I'm sorry for your loss. Lieutenant Park's sacrifice will not be forgotten. What are our orders, Admiral? Return to Earth immediately. And Sarah, tell your crew to prepare for war. The galaxy is about to learn what happens when you push humanity too far. As the Stellar Hope limped away from Omega 7, Sarah Chen allowed herself one last look at the massive trade station. Soon, every alien species that had stood by and watched a human officer be murdered would understand that humanity's patience was not weakness. It was a choice, and that choice had finally been revoked. The Reckoning. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood in the command center of the UES Retribution, humanity's most advanced warship, hidden for over 2 centuries in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Around her, dozens of officers worked at stations that officially didn't exist, coordinating a military operation that the galaxy had never suspected was possible. Fleet status report, she ordered, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent 40 years preparing for this moment. Commander Rebecca Torres, her chief of staff, consulted her tactical display. All deep space units have acknowledged Operation Nightfall. We have 847 combat vessels moving into position across 17 sectors. The Vorthak Empire currently has forces deployed in 12 systems, mostly concentrated around their recent territorial acquisitions. Elena nodded, studying the 3-dimensional hologram that showed the positions of every known military vessel in the galaxy. For 200 years, humanity had played the role of peaceful merchants and explorers, while secretly building the most advanced fleet in known space. Every cargo ship that had been inspected and found harmless had been scanning alien technology. Every diplomatic mission that had been humiliated had been gathering intelligence. Every insult and act of aggression had been carefully documented and filed away for this day. What about the Galactic Council's response to our fleet movements? They haven't detected anything yet, replied Lieutenant Colonel David Kim from the intelligence station. Our stealth technology is still several generations ahead of their sensors. As far as they know, human ships are still scattered across the galaxy on routine missions. Elena allowed herself a grim smile. The galaxy's major powers had consistently underestimated human technology because humans had been careful to show them only what they expected to see. Slow cargo ships, lightly armed patrol vessels, defensive installations that looked primitive compared to alien architecture. The truth was that human scientists had been reverse engineering and improving upon alien technology for centuries, creating weapons and defenses that would shock even the most advanced civilizations. Admiral, called Captain Michael Chen from the communication station, we're receiving a priority transmission from Captain Sarah Chen aboard the Stellar Hope. Put her through. Sarah's face appeared on the main screen, her expression mixing grief with barely controlled rage. Admiral, we've just departed Omega 7. The medical supplies for Kepler 442 bits have been confiscated, and Lieutenant Park is dead. The Galactic Council has officially sanctioned his murder. I know, Sarah. I've seen the recordings and read the Council's decision. Belinda's voice was steady, but everyone on the bridge could see the fury in her eyes. How are you holding up? I'm ready to make them pay, ma'am. My crew is ready. Every human in this sector is ready. Elena nodded. She had known Sarah Chen for over 20 years and had watched her endure humiliation after humiliation in the name of diplomacy. If Sarah was ready for war, then humanity's patience had truly reached its end. Return to Earth, Captain. Your ship needs repairs, and your crew needs time to process what happened. But Sarah... Yes, Admiral. This won't go unanswered. I promise you that. As the transmission ended, Elena turned to address her senior staff. Gentlemen and ladies, 2 days ago, Lieutenant James Park died because the galaxy's powers have decided that human lives have no value. Today, the Galactic Council officially endorsed his murder. Tomorrow, they're going to learn the price of that decision. General Patricia Thompson, commander of the Earth Defense Forces, had been listening from her position at the Strategic Planning Station. Elena, are we really going to war with the entire galaxy? Not the entire galaxy, Patricia. Just the parts that have forgotten that strength without honor is tyranny, and tyranny must be opposed. Elena activated the main communication system, opening channels to every human military unit in space. This is Admiral Vasquez to all human forces. Operation Nightfall is now active. You know your targets. You know your missions. For 2 centuries, we have been patient. We have endured insults, theft, and murder while hoping that reason and diplomacy would prevail. Today, that patience ends. The first target was the Vorthek military station at Kepler Prime, where Commander Zektar had taken the stolen medical supplies. The station was considered impregnable, protected by energy shields that could withstand direct hits from stellar-class weapons, and defended by a fleet of 63 warships. Captain Marcus Webb commanded the human task force approaching the station. His flagship, the UES Vengeance, had been disguised as a mining vessel for 15 years, while secretly monitoring Vorthek military activities. Now, as it dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler Prime system, its true nature was finally revealed. All ships, this is Captain Webb. Target acquisition confirmed. Begin assault pattern Alpha. The Vorthek defenders had approximately 30 seconds to realize that the approaching human ships were not the helpless merchants they appeared to be. In those 30 seconds, their worldview changed forever. The UES Vengeance fired first, its main cannon delivering a concentrated plasma burst that punched through the station's shields like they were made of paper. Secondary batteries targeted the Vorthek fleet, each shot precisely calculated to disable rather than destroy. Within minutes, 63 of the galaxy's most advanced warships were drifting powerless in space, their weapons systems offline and their engines dead. Commander Zektar watched from the station's command center as his entire fleet was neutralized without a single human ship taking damage. The tactical displays showed weapon signatures and energy patterns that his computers couldn't even identify, much less counter. How is this possible? He chittered to his tactical officer. Human technology is primitive. Their ships are weak. Sir, the officer replied, his voice shaking, I'm reading power outputs from the human vessels that exceed anything in our database. Their weapons appear to be based on principles we don't understand. The communication system activated, and Captain Webb's voice filled the Vorthek command center. Commander Zektar, this is Captain Marcus Webb of the United Earth Space Forces. You are now a prisoner of war. Surrender immediately, and you will be treated according to the standards of civilized warfare. I will never surrender to an inferior species. Zektar snarled, activating the station's remaining weapon systems. The response was swift and decisive. The UES Vengeance fired a single precisely targeted shot that destroyed the station's main reactor while leaving the rest of the structure intact. Emergency power flickered on, providing just enough illumination for the Vorthek defenders to see human soldiers teleporting directly into their command center. The technology was impossible according to everything the Vorthek knew about physics, but the soldiers materializing around them were undeniably real. They wore armor that seemed to absorb energy weapons fire and carried rifles that fired projectiles at relativistic speeds. Zektar found himself face to face with a human soldier whose armor bore the insignia of a sergeant major. The human removed his helmet, revealing a scared face and cold eyes. Commander Zektar, the soldier said in perfect Vorthek, I am Sergeant Major William Santos. You murdered Lieutenant James Park in cold blood. You stole medical supplies intended for plague victims. You did these things because you believed humans were too weak to stop you. Zektar's mandibles clicked nervously. Humans are weak. You proved nothing with your parlor tricks and hidden weapons. Santos smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. We're not here to prove anything, Commander. We're here to collect a debt. Within hours, news of the Vorthek fleet's defeat reached the Galactic Council chambers on Nexus Prime. The assembled representatives listened in stunned silence as Ambassador Lu Wei, humanity's chief diplomatic representative, addressed the chamber. Honored members of the council, Lu began, his voice carrying none of the pleading tone that had characterized human diplomatic efforts for centuries. Yesterday, you voted to classify the murder of Lieutenant James Park as a justifiable action. Today, you have learned the consequences of that decision. High Merchant Krill Knox rose from his crystal throne, his body flickering with indignation. Ambassador Lu, humanity has committed an act of naked aggression against a sovereign member of this council. The Vorthek Empire demands immediate sanctions against Earth and all human colonies. The Vorthek Empire, Lu replied calmly, is no longer in a position to demand anything. As of this morning, they have lost 60% of their fleet and 40% of their military installations. Emperor Vexthal himself is currently contemplating surrender terms aboard our flagship. The chamber erupted in shocked chittering, humming, and clicking as representatives from dozens of species tried to process this information. The Vorthak had been considered one of the three most powerful military forces in the galaxy. The idea that humans had defeated them in a single day was almost incomprehensible. Ambassador Nalthoris of the Centaurian Federation stood up, his massive bulk making the floor vibrate. This is impossible. Human military capabilities are well documented. Your species lacks the technology for such an achievement. Lu Wei smiled, and for the first time in his diplomatic career, it was not the desperate smile of someone hoping for mercy. Ambassador Nalthoris, human military capabilities have never been fully documented. We've simply chosen to show you only what we wanted you to see. A new voice echoed through the chamber as Admiral Elena Vasquez materialized via holographic projection. Her image appeared at the center of the council floor, larger than life, and carrying an authority that made even the most arrogant representatives fall silent. Members of the Galactic Council, she began, for 200 years, humanity has sought peaceful coexistence with all species. We have endured insults, theft, and murder because we believed that reason would eventually prevail. Yesterday, you proved that belief was naive. Emperor Vexthal himself appeared on a secondary projection, his proud chitinous form now hunched in defeat. The human admiral speaks truth. My empire underestimated their capabilities. We all did. Emperor, Elena continued, you will order the immediate return of all stolen medical supplies to human vessels. You will provide full restitution for the families of every human killed by Vorthek forces, and you will publicly apologize for the murder of Lieutenant James Park. The Vorthek Emperor's compound eyes dimmed with humiliation, but he had seen what human weapons could do to his fleets. I agree to these terms. High Merchant Krill Knox's crystal body flared with angry light. Admiral Vasquez, you cannot dictate terms to sovereign members of this council. The Plutonian Trade Consortium will not recognize any agreements made under military coercion. Elena's expression didn't change, but her voice carried a new edge. High Merchant, 3 hours ago your trade fleet in the Proxima sector encountered technical difficulties. All 47 vessels are currently adrift with disabled engines. They will remain that way until you decide whether you want to discuss this matter reasonably or learn what happened to the Vorthek fleet. The threats were delivered so calmly that it took several seconds for their implications to sink in. Humans had simultaneously struck at military and economic targets across multiple sectors, demonstrating coordination and technological superiority that shocked even the Council's most cynical members. Ambassador Nalthoris attempted to maintain his species' dignified composure. Admiral, Surely we can resolve this through diplomatic channels. The Centaurian Federation has always maintained cordial relationships with humanity. Have you? Alina's projection turned to face the Centaurian representative. Ambassador, your people have consistently voted to exclude humans from key decisions, supported discriminatory trade practices, and just yesterday endorsed the murder of one of our officers. How exactly does that constitute cordial relationships? The truth was that every major species in the galaxy had underestimated humanity, while simultaneously exploiting and oppressing them. They had assumed that patience meant weakness, that diplomacy meant subservience, and that quiet endurance meant acceptance of inferior status. Now they were learning the difference between patience and weakness. Admiral Vasquez's projection expanded to address the entire council chamber. The age of taking advantage of human goodwill is over. From this day forward, humanity will be treated as an equal member of the galactic community, or we will remind you why that equality should be respected. Are you threatening the entire galaxy? Demanded High Merchant Chromax. I'm stating a fact, Alina replied. For 2 centuries, we've been building the most advanced military force in known space, while you've been congratulating yourselves on keeping us in our place. Today, you've learned what that place actually is. The demonstration continued for 3 more days as human forces methodically dismantled the military capabilities of every species that had participated in oppressing humanity. Trade fleets found themselves stranded with disabled engines. Military bases discovered their weapons wouldn't function. Communication networks experienced mysterious failures that somehow only affected those who had voted against human interests. The message was clear. Humanity possessed technology that was centuries ahead of anything the galaxy had seen, and the patience to use it wisely had finally run out. On the 4th day, Emperor Vexthul appeared before the Galactic Council in chains, not physical restraints, but something far more humiliating to a proud warrior species. He was there voluntarily, compelled by the knowledge that resistance would mean the complete destruction of his empire. Members of the council, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, I have come to formally apologize for the murder of Lieutenant James Park and all other crimes committed against humanity by Vorthek forces. My species acted from arrogance and ignorance. We believed strength meant the right to oppress the weak. The humans have shown us that true strength means protecting the innocent and defending justice. The apology was broadcast across the galaxy, watched by trillions of beings who had never imagined they would see a Vorthek emperor humbled. But more shocking than the apology was what came next. Admiral Vasquez appeared once again, but this time her projection showed her standing on the bridge of a ship unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The vessel was clearly human in design, but it incorporated technologies that seemed almost magical in their sophistication. Citizens of the galaxy, she announced, humanity does not seek domination or revenge. We seek only the respect and equality that should be accorded to all sentient species. The medical supplies stolen from our ships have been returned and are now being delivered to the plague victims on Kepler 442 bits. The families of murdered humans will receive full compensation, and the galaxy will remember that patience is not weakness. The demonstration of human power ended as suddenly as it had begun. Disabled ships found their systems restored. Stranded fleets discovered their engines working again. Military bases saw their weapons come back online. But everyone understood that this restoration was a gift, not a return to the previous status quo. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the rebuilt Stellar Hope, watching as her cargo hold was loaded with twice the medical supplies that had been stolen at Omega 7. Representatives from a dozen species had personally delivered the materials, along with formal apologies and requests for future cooperation. Lieutenant Park's replacement, Ensign Maria Rodriguez, approached with a communication pad. Captain, we're receiving priority messages from trade stations across the sector. Everyone wants to negotiate new agreements with human merchants. Sarah smiled, but it was tinged with sadness for the young officer who had died to make this change possible. Schedule the meetings, Ensign. But make sure they understand that respect is now a prerequisite for any business relationship. As the stellar hope departed for Kepler 442 bits, Sarah reflected on how quickly the galaxy had changed. Species that had treated humans as inferior now competed for their attention. Trade routes that had been closed to human ships were now open and welcoming. The Galactic Council had formally recognized humanity as a major power and invited them to take permanent seats on all important committees. The transformation wasn't just political. It was psychological. For the first time in 2 centuries, humans walked through alien cities with their heads held high. They negotiated from positions of strength rather than desperation. They were no longer the galaxy's junior partners begging for scraps of respect. The plague on Kepler 442 bits was eliminated within weeks of the medical supplies' arrival. The colony not only survived but prospered, becoming a testament to what could be achieved when human ingenuity was given the resources and respect it deserved. But perhaps the most important change was in humanity itself. They had learned that sometimes patience must have limits, that diplomacy without strength is merely another form of surrender, and that respect cannot be begged for. It must be earned, and when necessary, demanded. The galaxy had pushed humanity too far, and in doing so, had awakened a sleeping giant that would never again be taken for granted. The age of human patience was over, but the age of human strength had just begun. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood in her private quarters aboard the UES Retribution, looking out at the stars that had once seemed hostile and dismissive. Now they represented possibility, challenge, and opportunity for a species that had finally claimed its rightful place among the galactic powers. The war had lasted only 4 days, but its effects would endure for centuries. Humanity had shown that they were not the weak, naive species the galaxy had believed them to be. They were patient, yes. Diplomatic, certainly. But when pushed beyond the breaking point, they were utterly formidable. Lieutenant James,